Serum 2 is out now. It's a free update for existing users, and it's a crazy update. I'm not saying that just to glaze you. This is a massive influx of new features for this already iconic software synthesizer. I'm Echo Soundworks. Welcome back to the ADSR channel. I'm going to be showing you all the things that you should check out, play around with for yourself, and get to know. So let's quickly just do an overview of the new features. So up at the top, you'll notice that we have a new page. We have a mix page. So now there are 5 pages in Serum: Oscillator, Mix, Effects, Matrix, and Global. The mix page is probably one of the more, advanced elements of this update, or components of this update, I should say. It allows you to really fine-tune the signal path of each of the oscillators, where they go, why they go to certain places. And now that we have more filters and more effects, it's kind of this crazy cool new frontier for sound design in Serum. Now, if we go back to the oscillator page, you'll notice that there is one more primary oscillator. We now have 3 main oscillators, plus our sub-os and our noise os. Now, that's not all for the oscillators. It's not just we have more of the oscillators. We have 4 new oscillator modes or types. We have multisample, sample, granular, and spectral. So 5 total oscillator modes for each of the primary oscillators, os A, B, and C. We also have some updates to the noise oscillators we'll cover a little bit later. And we have 2 filters on the main page. So that means we can set up series and parallel processing. We can determine which oscillator goes into the filter. We can also set how much of each oscillator goes into each filter and pair that with our routing in the mix page. Super flexible, super detail oriented, which will allow for incredibly cool new sounds to be made and created in Serum. Now, moving down, you'll notice that there are 8 macros instead of 4. If we look at our envelope section, we have a 4th envelope, so increase of 1. We have LFOs. We can have up to 10 LFOs in total, I believe, and we also have some new LFO types. Now, moving down to the bottom of Serum, you'll notice a lot of new content. This is crazy. We have a clip sequencer. So think of this as like Cthulhu kind of built into Serum. And over to the right of that, we have a dedicated arpeggiator, finally. So now Serum not only can play MIDI, it can import MIDI, and you can trigger the MIDI sequences or clips on certain keys. You can do the same thing with a dedicated arpeggiator. Like I said at the beginning, I was not glazing this update. This is a big update. So let's dive into things a little bit more depth and see how some of the new oscillator features take shape. So we'll just work left to right here. So first up is the sub-oscillator. Some of the new features here, instead of just having an octave control, we now have a coarse pitch control in the actual sub-oscillator. So that will allow for a lot more flexibility with modulating sounds and getting sounds to make the actually sub-oscillator not just act as a sub-os, right? We can actually use this as more or less a virtual analog oscillator, especially now that we have dedicated phase control. So you can think of this as kind of like a sample start, but you're working with a really tiny little waveform in the, it's like just a loop simple waveform, right? And so this allows you to change this phase. And you can hear this if I play a bunch of notes. If I actually put an LFO on this, you'll notice that it kind of sounds like a vibrato, right? And that's just because the phase is kind of changing, as it plays along. You can right-click on this and select a couple different options. You have a contiguous or wrap phase, and that will basically change how the phase follows your playback, which is really cool and kind of a nice advanced feature for kind of the oscillator that people always think, oh, this is simple. It's just a sub-os. Let's take a deep dive into the new wavetable features. So the wavetables, we not only have a whole factory library of essentially just new wavetables for Serum 2, right? So there's a ton of stuff in here, a ton of content. We also do have the original factory content from Serum 1 as well. I'll load up a couple of these. So everything from super crunchy digital waves to a lot of new analog waveforms from classic synths, modular synths, a lot of cool stuff is in here. Yeah, so definitely explore those. There's a lot of new content. Now, moving down, we'll see that we have same controls, phase, random, everything that was in the primary oscillator is here. Now, if we go down to our wavetable position knob, you'll notice that we have the unison control plus this little gear icon. Now, you might remember this from if you guys got kind of deep into sound design. Let's go to just a saw waveform real quick. This will work. All right, so there is an ARP 2600 saw. Now you'll notice that with the unison, we can crank this up. what you'd come to expect with the unison. But you'll notice if you click on this gear icon, you can access the different unison modes straight from this window, which is a really nice new update, actually. That used to be on the global page, so that is now here. Now, down below, this is pretty cool. We have 2 warp modes per oscillator. So in Serum 1, it was just the 1. Now we can apply 2 warps, and we have some new warp modes. So, for instance, we have filter warp modes and distortion warp modes. So all of the distortions that we get in the effects rack, if you're a Serum user, you'll remember things like tube, soft clip, diode, etc. That's now a warp mode. So if I change this to a sine wave, for example, give it one voice unison, we're going to load in one of these distortion. We'll do soft clip. I mean, that's crazy. That's right here per voice, right? So the reason why I say per voice, check this out. So if let's go to a more aggressive one. Okay, that works. Diode 1. So let's turn this down. Let's go to our effects page real quick. Go to the main, and we're going to click, we'll do distortion, and we're going to select the same one. We're going to do diode 1. I'm going to crank the drive up. So I'm going to play this chord, right? So we're going to play a C minor chord. Okay, it's so much distortion that it becomes hard to hear the actual notes. And that's because the distortion is being applied to all of the voices that I'm playing. So this is just a simple sine wave. You can imagine how crazy this would get with something like, I don't know, like unison voices. So that's diode 1, right? Up all the way. We're going to turn this off and go back to our oscillator and crank it up here. So we're doing the same thing, but now it's on a per voice. So it's not going to just be tossed over the end sound, kind of like dressing on a salad. It's going to be the individual components of the salad. Oh, that's so good. Oh yeah, so that's amazing that we have those distortion. Now we have FM and PD. So these are two kind of obviously FM, right? So in the original Serum, we had FM, like FM from A, F from B. That, if you want that exact sound, the FM from A, FM from B from Serum 1, you actually need to load up the PD, which stands for phase distortion. So watch, I will, let's initialize this preset actually, and we'll just do 2 saw waves. Crank down the volume on oscillator B, and we'll load up the PD. We'll do PD from B. So that's very familiar to anyone who's ever worked with the FM from A, FM from B. But now that's PD. FM is more of a true FM style. So let's check out the difference. Huge difference, right? This is more of like a modular style FM. So just know there is a difference. We also have some new RM and AM, and now we can do actually more from each one, right? So I can do FM from B, FM from a filter send, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and I could apply multiple of these on one oscillator. So I can do FM from C as well. So we'll go to C, and we'll load in a different wavetail position and turn this down. So now I have. Let's change both of these to PD from C and PD from B. That's so cool. Yeah, being able to have both in the oscillator is crazy. All right, let's check out one more thing with the warps. In the sync warp mode, you'll notice that there's only one now. In Serum 1, there was a couple different ones you could choose from. That is because when you select sync, this little slider shows up down here, and this will change the window size of the sync. So that's pretty cool because now you can modulate in between different values. So as opposed to it being a hard-coded or kind of a hard stop value of like a full window or half, whatever it is, you can now go in between and have that variable amount, which is pretty neat. Now, the last thing we're gonna check out with the warp mode is there are, of course, 2 warp modes per oscillator. So now we are gonna check out the multi-sample synthesis engine or mode inside of Serum 2. So you click the drop down up where it says Wavetable or your oscillator mode type, and we'll select multisample. From there, go under there, and you can select one of the included multisample sets. So this is going to be let's turn off the filter. This is a baby grand piano. All right, so we'll just turn off those effects. That's some bad key playing, but you get the idea. So yeah, so you can see these little lines here if you don't know what that means. If you've never seen like a sample map, it looks like the back end of Contact or the Logic sampler, Ableton's multisample, right? Basically, this is saying, hey, this sample has 3 different velocities going up vertically, and it has all these different samples going across horizontally, which are different notes. So that's what's nice about that. If you're noob or you're new to this type of stuff, is that your high notes won't be played really short and kind of like a chipmunk, because it's a separate sample. So if this was just one sample stretched across the keyboard, it would kind of sound like a chipmunk or Darth Vader down low. And so that's nice. Now, not every sample set will have multi-velocity. Some of them just have one velocity like this one here, and then it just goes across different samples. So that's still kind of cool. It's very neat to have that. Now, if you load up one that only has a single velocity sample, just make sure you have a bellow track on. Now, if I play a note quietly to hard, we actually get that pseudo, velocity, which is pretty neat. Now, this little ADSR icon here is pretty neat. So now Serum 2, just like Serum 1, the amp envelope is defaulted to the first envelope. If you click this little envelope icon in your multi-sample, you can select the override to where this will now be the envelope controlling the sample, which is really cool. So I'll show you why that's so cool. If you load up, let's get off of the envelope real quick, and we're gonna load up like a string. Let's do full strings. Okay. Now, let's say I wanted to layer that with some other sound, and I wanted that other sound to come in first. I'm just gonna keep this saw sample. It's a bad example. Okay, so with this sound, let's say I wanted the saw to happen first. So let's say I wanted something like this for my saw sound, or my more transient rich sound. And then in oscillator B, we want the string coming in after, right? So I couldn't just go like this, because I'll hit both the string sample and the synth. So that's where you click this icon, click override, and then dial in your ADSR shape. Right, now we play this together. Now we hear the transient first of that synth layer. And if I play quickly, you won't even hear the strings, right? So that's a really cool feature. And yeah, that's gonna be great for like layering the ethereal pad type stuff. Now, moving to the next mode, we have sample. This is basically just a single shot variety of the multi-sample engine. So this just will load up a single sample, and you can load in your own sample into this layer as well. Drag and drop. You have some different controls here where you can one shot, forward, loop. This will set up some loop points. So right now it's just one shot. Let's do reverse loop. Drag this back like so. And now it's gonna hit the end and go backwards. Right, super cool. And this right here is your crossfade. So you can get nice, smooth, basically loops that don't have pops and clicks. Check this out. Super cool. I'm a sucker for reverse loop points, but that's how those work. And even with the sample engines, you do have a unison control, which is absolutely bonkers to me. It's kind of like a course, like a phasey course, which is awesome. You do have some warp modes as well. You don't have the bend plus, bend minus, because those only really work with waveforms that are being generated. They won't work with audio, but we do have filter, distortion, FM, a lot of the other warp modes, so you can use those to spruce up the single one-shot samples. Now, you can zoom in very, very fine on these samples. Just swipe up on your mouse or on your trackpad, and you will zoom in. So now let's check out the granular engine or mode. A lot of people are gonna love this. It's great for anything ethereal pad, just adding in some cool layers. So we just select granular and then go check out some of the different options we have in the factory library. Let's go to bow. Actually, we'll do flute. Let's try one of these flute. Let's try flute delay. You know, in this, you have a bunch of the same controls you have in some of the other engines, but you have all the things that you would associate with granular synthesis. So we can scan through. This will determine how far it scans through the audio, right? If you go past this point, it'll start from the back half. And the density will be how many grains it will try to create or scan with. So let's take this to the front. And you do have sample starts on all of the sample-based engines, so both multi-sample, the single sample, and the granular engine. Now I want to get a little bit popping out, so we are going to fade that. And you can zoom in, like I said, you can really zoom in, so you can try to find a zero crossing manually, or you can right-click and you can have it snap to zero. So that will take where you generally or loosely position your sample start and snap it to a zero crossing. So there shouldn't be pops and clicks now. And we can also normalize, reverse, and trim. So let's try reversing it, and we'll zoom back out. What's really cool about this is we still do have access to warp modes. Just click this little drop down where it says warp, and now we can see that we have warp modes. But just like the other sample-based warps, we don't have some of the ones that we have with the wavetables. For instance, you'll notice that right here we have sync not available. The alt warp with the bend plus, bend minus, asim, etc. Those are not available to us in this mode, but who cares? It's still epic, and there's still a bunch of stuff that we can do with this. Oh my God, the random knob. Woo! So if you don't know what the random knob does, it's basically just an orgasm to your ear. I mean, it's basically gonna, every time I hit a note, it's gonna start to move where it starts to grab the grains and how it's gonna look at density in the scan, the length, and all the other controls you have set, but it just makes things so smooth and nice. All right, now next up we have the spectral mode. You'll notice that when you switch to, I just switched from granular to spectral, it still kept the sample that I was working with, which is so nice, which must have been a pain in the butt to do from like a filter or a sample backend browsing system. We still have the flute delay loaded up, but now we're in a whole other mode. We're in spectral. So what spectral synthesis does, don't want to get too far the bounds of this video, it loads in a sample. It's sample-based. It basically decodes the audio and rebuilds it spectrally with harmonics coming from the audio. And what you can usually do is kind of in-paint or paint into that with different effects. And you can definitely do that in Serum. Check us out. So right now, this will just be the sample that the flute, basically the sample we had in the last example. I've noticed that the spectral is quite loud, so sorry about that volume, but let's turn it down. All right, so let's go and let's go back to granular actually. Let me see this. Let me click this. It's still reversed. How cool is that? Okay, so let's go back to this and yep, it's still reversed. Let's unreverse it and get it playing normally again. Turn the scan up so we're starting from the beginning. All right, so if we take the scan up high, it plays through the sample faster. If we take it down low, it plays it slower, which is great for like frozen reverb style effects, but without actually using like a reverb freeze function. Super cool for dissonant, kind of almost atonal pads. Now, these sliders right here will take out frequencies, but on a spectral level. And the warp modes in this, we get a whole new category, these spectral warps, and these are just absolutely nuts. Check us out. Detune. Oh my God. So good, so good. Let's try another. I haven't even tried all these yet. There's so many of them. Let's try pitch shift. You're really cool on like a dark trap beat. Yeah, so there are a ton of these. I'm not gonna go through them all in this video, but absolutely check those out. They are amazing. So now let's just take a quick look at the noise oscillator because there are quite a few updates packed into this tiny little section of the GUI. You might notice, hey, what that seems like it's really out of place. It is. It was over here on the left in Serum 1. Now it's over here on the right. So if you click the drop down where you can load in different noise samples or sounds, you'll notice that the old standbys are here. Alpha noise, bright white, kicks, miscellaneous attacks, right? They're all there. We also have a new S2 noises folder. So let's just go to the bright white. One of the nice things is you can zoom in on the waveform and you can actually see what's going on. Now, we didn't have that in the last version of Serum, and that's really cool for like the transients. If you're trying to get like really detailed information about where you want a sound to start. So let's go to Serum 2 noises and let's try one of these fret noises. Now I can really zoom in here and I can scrub and I can really find where I want my sound to start, and I can change the start position like so. Now, the other controls are pretty standard. We had fine tune, a pitch, level, and pan. Let's go to this new color option. So these I do not believe are samples. I believe they're actually generated sounds. And you'll notice that you have a different set of controls here. So we'll tab through a couple of these. They change color, which I absolutely love. Notice that you have a stereo control, which is epic, and you have a filter built in, right? Amazing. And then, of course, you have level and pan. So now we're going to take a look at the new filters on the oscillator page. Now, this is probably one of the more important parts of this update because we now have two filters on the front page, which means we can set up series, parallel routing, whatever we want to do, we can now achieve. So to turn them on and off, you select the blue little button, similar to Serum 1. Now with this, you want to make sure that you have your right oscillator routed in. So for instance, here's our sound, just a basic saw right now. Turn this on. We want to make sure that A is selected on filter 1, right? If it's not selected, it won't be routed to that filter. Now, it sounds like it's not hitting the whole filter. Why? Well, that's because we can now select how much of each oscillator goes to which filter. So right now, this is in the middle of filter 1 and filter 2. Well, filter 2 is not doing anything, so that's like turning it off. So we want to make sure this is being sent all the way to filter 1 right now. And now it'll react in a way which we assume it would. Now, in terms of overall changes to the filter mode, it is quite similar. The controls, the types of filters we have, a lot of the old standbys are there, but we do have new filter modes, and let's check those out right now. All right, so the first filter we're going to check out in the Serum 2 is this WSP. This is modeled after the famous Wasp filter, Wasp synth, I should say. It's really the only way to describe it is it adds kind of like a buzz. That's a lot of people who've used that synth to describe it. I've never personally used it, so I don't know from personal experience, but there are some other synths out there. There's a couple developers who make Wasp synth clones. So this is a low pass filter by default. If we morph it, it'll change it to a high pass, which is pretty cool that there's both in there. And if you stay at about halfway, it turns into kind of a pseudo notch filter with a fairly limited notch size. You can't really change that. The resonance doesn't do a whole lot. So let's take this back down to the low pass, and we're going to take an envelope and we're just going to modulate the cutoff. Let's crank that drive a little bit. So it's got a nice snappy sound. Now let's just compare this. I'm going to play audio. I'm going to play this little bass line. or something very similar. And I will change it to the normal filter so we can kind of A/B this. So here's the Wasp. I mean, that's a huge difference in sound. That filter sounds amazing. To me, the Wasp filter, when I've heard it in other synths, it's always kind of sounded similar to like an acid filter mixed with a kind of a diode style filter. So kind of best of both worlds. All right, so the next filter we'll be checking out is the Diffuser. This is patterned off of Kilohertz Disperser. If you're not like a bass music or heavy kind of a trap bass music producer, you're probably not going to know what that thing is. It's essentially like this magic all-pass filter that heavy bass aficionados absolutely love, and now we have that type of filter in Serum. So to check this out, we're going to be looking at it on an actual preset. So here's kind of a heavy bass sound. You get the idea. So what's going on with the sound right now is we have a couple oscillators, a noise oscillator, routed into a bandpass, right? If I turn off this bandpass filter, turn off our sub, right? It loses that kind of bass housey type sound. So what we want to do is we want to have the disperser. For this sound, I think I'd like it more if the disperser hit before the bandpass filter. So to do that, I'm going to show you a couple cool tips and tricks. All right, so we're going to right click where it says filter. We're going to hit copy with mods, go to filter 2, and we're going to paste. And that will paste it in with the mods. Now, it doesn't sound the same, and that's because of our routing setup. So let's click this little tab right here where it says filter 1. Right now, the sound's being routed into filter 1. That's an issue. We want to route this into filter 2. You'll notice as soon as I do that, it routes A into it. I could have also, if we undo this, you'll notice that this is down at 1. If I select A while I have filter 2 on and filter 2 selected, you'll notice that it pops this up to 50%. Well, I want this going all the way to 100 just to make sure that it's the same. And that is the same sound we started with. So now we can get the diffuser going. So let's turn on the filter, and we're going to make sure that we're going to turn this to make sure that A is being routed into this. We don't need B going into that. We're going to select and go down to S2 filters and select the diffuser. Now, if this was in the original Serum, diffuser would for sure be in the miscellaneous filter bank. It is a all-pass style filter. So let's just activate this, and let's turn off filter 2 for now, and let's go back to our filter selector and go back to 1. So now we're only hearing Mr. Diffuser. There's a huge difference, and it just makes heavy basses sound good. So this is more or less the default shape. It's kind of like a rounded saw. If you turn the resonance up, right, so it pinches it in the same way that a bend plus warp mode would, which makes it kind of focus in more centrally on the frequencies around the cutoff point. Now, if we turn our bandpass filter back on, and we actually adjust how much of the filter is going to the bandpass versus the diffuser, and let's turn off diffuser. The next filter we're going to check out is the new MG ladder. This is the clean one. And so this is patterned off of most likely a Moog or a Prophet. It is a ladder style filter. And we're going to check this out and A/B it on this dark bass preset that's trying to sound like an analog bass preset. Here that preset is, I should say, with the standard MG low filter included in Serum 1. And here it is with the new MG ladder. A little bit cleaner, a little bit smoother, right? In terms of the controls, it is a low-pass filter. We have a cutoff, resonance, and drive, pretty similar. This knob here, which is a fat knob on all the other, or most of the other, I should say, low-pass filters included in Serum 1. It now says smooth. So this is a pretty cool knob. Down at 0%, it won't really do anything. And it also doesn't do a whole lot unless you're actually modulating. So if we set this down low and listen to our LFO that's modulating the cutoff of the filter versus this, It smooths out the modulation at the cutoff point, which is really awesome. And it'll be great for basses exactly like this, or maybe even some respaces or any type of sound where you want some modulation, but you don't want it to be as intense as it opens up that filter. All right, the last filter we're going to check out, because I could talk you guys' ears off for hours talking about these filters because I'm a nerd, is going to be the acid filter. So let's load that up. And this is essentially a model of a very famous, you guys probably have heard of it. It's an acid filter. It's known for acid house. It's used for acid bass lines. It's basically, there's a magic resonance knob that gives it this nice little snap and sound that's just ubiquitous to those genres of music. So let's just pitch down our saw waveform, take an envelope shape, little plucky envelope shape, modulate the cutoff, option shift click to get it unipolar instead of bipolar. Make sure that we're routed all the way into filter 1. So now we just have kind of a, I don't know, doesn't sound like anything special. It's just a low pass filter, right? But if you crank up this resonance knob a little, there's the acid sound, right? Now we add a little bit of drive. Now this filter, just like the last filter we looked at, has this new smooth knob, which will smooth out the cutoff modulation that's being achieved with our envelope 2. Let's turn down the decay. So the LFO section got a little bit of a facelift. Looks pretty similar to the original Serum, but over here on the right, we can we can click this little pop out to make it big, which is really nice. We also have these different curve selectors. So the dot is like how you would expect it to work if you're coming from Serum 1, double click, create a dot, make your curve, right? You can just select these other shapes so you can just make different shapes more easily, right? You just select the shape that you want and you're off and running. Now, those used to be key commands, so that's kind of nice. All right, so I have loaded up a preset that has a couple different oscillators. We got oscillator A with just a simple waveform. We have a string sample being ran into the spectral mode or engine, and then we have some noise. It sounds like this. Fun little sound design tip. You'll notice that when I play a really high note, like it's really filtered and you don't hear the noise. That is because the noise is being routed into our filter, but we have this note macro, right? So basically the low notes, they're nearly fully open, right? When I was playing those chords. Then when I play these higher notes, and that's a really cool, subtle technique you can use to get leads kind of into your pads without overtaking the pad. Now, all right, so the path LFO is quite cool. You can basically just create these different shapes. So this is the default kind of shape. It's a circle. And if we just pop this on, you'll notice that we have an X and a Y, right? For X axis and Y axis. And we can modulate both of these separately, which is really neat. So let's turn off oscillator B for now. And let's just apply this. Let's take the X, and we'll grab this over, modulate the level of oscillator A. Oh, it's so good. Love it. Now, if we go and we grab Y, and we'll do that in an opposite direction. Now we have X going in a positive value and Y going in a negative value. Let's see what this does. Really tight, right? So let's take that value back a little bit on both of these, just to get some nice flutter. And let's turn the rate down. Oh my God, I love it. So yeah, so let's try that with the rest of the sound. Yeah, it's amazing. So you can draw your own shapes here. So let's go and we'll go to path. Let's go to the drop down. We'll hit default. So here it is by default. You can just click and swipe and then drag different shapes, right? And you can choose these different modes to kind of draw out or help you draw different shapes, right? There are a bunch of cool presets. One of them is called Serum, which spells out serum. Let's try that. It's very stuttery, but that is the path. Let's go and check out the Chaos Lorenz and the Chaos Rossier. And these were in the back end of Serum 1. They were in the global setting or the settings page. Now they're just front and center. And they too have the X and the Y value. And of course we have sample and hold. Sample and hold is a great one. Let me bypass these from our destinations. Sample and hold is a great one to get kind of like lo-fi pitch glitches, and you can even do tape stops with it if you set it up correctly, but we're gonna modulate the fine pitch of this. So see how it's gonna jump all over the place? Smooth it out. And let's take the value down. And now we have this kind of nice little pitch movement happening, and we'll bring that back in with everything else. Now, down at the bottom, we have a lot of new things. We have Clip and Arp. Clip is a full-on MIDI sequencer piano roll. It's basically like having Xfer's Cthulhu inside of Serum. Was not on the bingo card for this being a part of Serum 2, but I love it. Let's get acquainted with some of the things that it's capable of doing. So there's a few different ways you can work with the Clip sequencer. You can load in actual whole chord progressions. You can load in chord progressions from MIDI files, and you can assign each whole chord progression to a clip. For instance, due to chords, we'll load up a bunch of different chords into these different, basically these little clips that you can then assign to keys to trigger the whole clip. You can also hit play. And then you can also load in and assign chords that are kind of one-shot chords. Think like Cthulhu. So then each one of these, let's transpose this up, would essentially play a different chord. Transpose this one up as well. And you could assign those to different keys and then trigger them that way. You can also load in drum kits, and each of the drum kits in Serum 2 will come with an accompanying clip pattern. So let's go back to our oscillator real quick, and I'm gonna just copy this. And we're gonna go and load up a factory drum kit. We'll just do 808 basic kit. And let's go into our clip now, and you'll notice that there is some drum patterns loaded in for us. That's that classic 808 vibe, right? Now, over to the right-hand side of the clip, we have a dedicated arpeggiator. Finally, we have this in Serum. Making arps in Serum 1 was a pain in the... It was basically using an LFO shape with like a stepper. This is so much better, and this is going to make Serum way more powerful. Let's check out some of its features. So the arpeggiator is quite, it's a unique approach to an arpeggiator in a synth. I haven't seen this exact implementation. I've seen things that are similar. But what we have here is on the left, we have a global where we can we'll load in the 5-note 8-step. So these basically launch different clips depending on which one is selected. If I select number 8, and now I play some notes here, we turn on our ARP, we will hear it. Now if I go and select the first clip and play the same thing, right, we'll hear a different pattern, and this will hold true for all the slots that have an active pattern in them. Now, this is really cool because what this allows you to do is it allows you to create long, evolving, complex arpeggiated patterns. You could start at one of them and morph into the next one just by automating it or selecting a trigger down here in the trigger keys where you can assign the active slot to, right? So you'd pass your MIDI through in your DAW and then shift it. It's like key switching in a sampler. I don't know if you guys have ever, I know a lot of people who watch this are more EDM, pop music production inclined, but if you've ever used like a Contact symphonic library or a kind of a classic sample library that's deeply sampled strings, brass, whatever it might be, an instrument, there's key switches to get different articulations of the instrument. That's essentially how you can use this, which is epic. Now, if we like one of the patterns, but we don't like everything about it, I mean, that's pretty dope, but we can go and click the pencil, and now we can actually edit the pattern that we're triggering. All right, so now let's head over to the mix page. I think the most important part of this update is how Serum can split signals and how you can make signals meet up wherever you want or choose. So let's take a deep dive and take a look at what we can do with the mix page. All right, so let's look at a simple signal flow setup. Right now we have one oscillator. We're gonna send that to a filter. We're gonna select a filter, go back to our oscillator, turn on filter 1 here, just low pass. All right, if we go to our mix page, we can now determine how much of the sound goes into that filter. We want all of it going into filter 1. Now let's load up oscillator B, another saw wave. We're gonna have this go to filter, but we're gonna say, hey, we want this to go to filter 2. Let's turn on filter 2. Let's go back to our oscillator and we're gonna choose a different filter type. Let's choose we'll do the Wasp filter. And we are going to modulate that with an envelope. Let's go back to our mix. So now oscillator B is skipping our first filter and going right into filter 2 because of this control here. This is our filter balance. Right, so it does not matter what's going on there. Now, whereas oscillator A is skipping filter B, or filter 2, and going straight just to filter 1 and then out to our output. So that's kind of a simple setup, right? Well, we can get more complex with this. We can actually tell our filters to go to other places. So if I want my filter 1 to then run into filter 2, I can select that. So now oscillator A is going into filter 1, then to filter 2, then our main. Whereas oscillator B is just going straight to filter 2. Now let's take that back to just go to main for filter 1. Now we can actually send some of the signal to a bus. So we can go to our effects and we can load in a bus effect chain. So let's just load in one of the saved presets here. We'll do distorted and go back to our mix. Now the oscillator that's being routed into our second filter is going to go to our bus effect before it hits the out. And we can modulate that mix of the bus send with any modulator that we choose, which is pretty cool. So now you can start to see how complex this can get. So now we can go, okay, bus 1, we could send that to bus 2 and just keep this going. Or we could say we want this to go direct out and avoid any of the processing that we have on our main effects. So for instance, if I go to main and I load up, we'll load up like a main bus effects, you'll see that those show up here. So let's say we wanted the sound that we routed out of filter 2 into bus 1, and we don't want that to go into our main effects, because right now this will be hitting all of this. Let's say we want this to go direct. Now the signal flow goes, for oscillator B, it's going into filter 2 only, into this bus, sent to here, and this is sent to direct out, and avoiding all the processing on our main filter. The fact that you have this in Serum just blows my mind, because you can really set up some intricate processing chains based on signal flow alone. All right, moving right along, the effects rack has a huge makeover. This button I love. It closes the envelopes, the LFOs, so now you have the full rack so you can see more of your effects. That's really important, because with this version of Serum, you are not limited to just one of each effect. If I want a bunch of distortions, I can just alt and click, drag down. I now have I have like 4 or 5 distortions. You can do that with filters as well. You can do it with everything. So if you want to melt your CPU, the option is there. Now, with that, you have these different effects chains. The main will be, your main standard effects unit or rack, just like in Serum 1. But these buses, these are where you can get real creative with what oscillator, what type of sound goes to what effects. Now the mod matrix, that's pretty much the exact same, except there's extra slots. Let's go to the global page where we're gonna check out this voice control. If you're a UHI diva, some UHI synths have controls like this, you're gonna love this. If you don't use those synths, you're still gonna love this. These basically allow you to add some analog realism in Serum. And let's check out how you can use this to make your patches more creative and more unique. All right, so I've pulled up kind of an analog inspired sounding patch. Sounds like this. We're gonna use the voice control to make this a little bit more analog yet. So we go to the global tab, and basically the way this is laid out, up here you have your source. So sub, oscillator A, B, C, and the noise. And then you have these 6 different options. This kind of works like a note triggered step sequencer. So it's not playing, it's only triggered when you play a note. So for instance, with all of these selected, all of my sources will be going into it. So I'm not currently using sub, or I am using noise. So we could go in theory, turn this off so that's not running into it. Now, if I go to the pan and I crank that up for 8, on the 8th note that I'm about to play on my MIDI keyboard, we are going to hear it pan to the right. Check it out. So I'm gonna play 8 notes, and on that 8th note, you're gonna hear one of them pan. So you get the idea of what this does. So if we add slight variances in here, right, leave some of them in the center, nothing too crazy. Now we're gonna have slight, kind of just a nice stereo, well, not stereo drift, but just a nice pan drift. Now you can apply this to the other elements of your signal flow: detune, cutoff, envelope, and even some mods. So let's go and load up. We'll do simple or subtle analog. So this one's gonna hit the detune, and we'll add a little bit of filter mojo to this as well. And let's try this. And finally, the preset browser has a nice update. Kind of feels a little bit Arturia-esque, which is not a bad thing. Having tags and categories is great. And finally, the last little feature I think everyone should know about, the undo button. You can just keep cranking undo. So if you mess something up, hit undo, you can actually redo, and it goes back a long ways and forward a long ways, which is awesome. So that sums up this video, this first look for Serum 2. If you guys have any questions or comments, post those below. Love to see what you think about this update and how excited you are to use Serum 2 moving forward. As always, thank you so much for watching. Hit that subscribe and like button. I'll see you next time.